Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. And again, this is parenting in a foreign culture. Now, parenting in a foreign culture is a topic that is near and dear to my heart because I am parenting in a foreign culture. I'm also a family life coach and an educator in family life. And so I hold this near and dear to my heart. But anyway, so the other day I was having a conversation with a family member, and this family member mentioned for the first time, this was the first time I was hearing it, the term third culture child. And I thought to myself, my goodness, what does that mean? And she went on to explain to me what third culture child or a third culture kid means. It's gained a lot of traction lately in on podcast and in social media, and everybody talking about third culture children. That term was coined by a sociologist, and it was first used right around in early 1900s, 1950-ish is when it was first used. And it was used to describe children of expats with working overseas and raising children in cultures that are different from their culture. So if you are parenting in a foreign culture, your child is labeled as a third culture child. I don't really know how I feel about that. Labels kind of leaves me a little uncomfortable sometimes because I feel like it always starts to separate us and divide us more. But anyway, that is a discussion for another day. So the idea of third culture again came from a sociologist, and that also that means that a third culture child, is referred to as someone whose parents are not from the culture in which that child is being raised, right? So you all know I am from Ghana, and so me migrating from Ghana, moving into the United States, and raising children in the United States, those children are known as third culture children. So those children are neither here nor there. They are not, like in my case, they're not Ghanaians per se, but they are not American as well. So they're caught in between this mixing bowl of cultures, and then they create their own culture in most cases, and then they become what is known as third culture, right? And so why is that important? As parents who are raising children in a foreign culture, why do we need to pay attention to this label? We need to pay attention to this label because now these children are in their own category. There's also research that shows that children within this category tend to have cultural identity issues. Okay, so especially in their teenage years, as their own identity and personality is forming and developing, most of these children tend to struggle with who they are culturally, right? And the challenge is that we as parents, we don't tend to empathize or even notice the struggle because we have a cultural identity. And I bet if we took a poll right now of all of you watching, you can tell me exactly where you're from, your grandparents are from. There is some roots, you have a tight connection with your roots, right? And so there is very almost little empathy or as parents paying attention to our children who are being raised certainly in this environment. So I have felt that. I have felt raising my children in this culture. I feel like they are not quite Ghanaian, although they would definitely tell you they are Ghanaian, especially when they were younger. But as they're growing, they've realized that there is a merge between these two cultures, and they, kind of create their own culture out of all of that, right? So what do you do? What are you to do as a parent raising a child in a culture like this? Number one, you need to understand that your child is not fully whatever your culture is, and it's not fully the culture in which you're raising them. So there needs to be some level of empathy. That level of empathy makes you appreciate the need for cultural immersion. Why is it important for a child? Why is it important for a child to have a strong cultural identity? It is important because it helps shape who they are. Culture is who you are, what you identify as, right? And so how do we help them? I think the first thing we need to do, and we will discuss this, that's the whole premise of this channel anyway, my friends. It's the idea that we're raising these children in this culture and we need to equip ourselves to do a good job. So like last week and the previous, my first, how do you call it? I've lost my words, but my first episode, I guess, was that we were talking about being authentic, right? And I want to go back to that word authentic. You, as a person from another culture, you are a cultural ambassador. And I think most people don't even realize that. Like, I feel like for my children, the Ghana they know is the Ghana I expose them to, right? And so for you to raise a child who has a strong identity with your culture and the culture in which they are, you do your part. Your job is to expose them to your culture. I especially for us Africans, I've seen a lot of Africans who will just talk down on our culture. We beat down on our culture. There's nothing good about our culture. We don't even want to take our children back home, right? And I know we don't want to take our children back home for several reasons. Sometimes it's the paperwork that is involved with our own paper and our own immigration situation, and it's hard to go back and forth. Sometimes it's purely financial. It's just an expensive trip to take your children back home. But there's some creative ways of exposing your children to your culture. Your language is one. And for me as a parent, that is my biggest regret. I feel like I should have really been hard as my children were younger to teach them my language, and I didn't. And I always tell people that that is my greatest, one of my biggest regrets. And my children are still young, so there is still hope that I can teach them the language. They do understand when I speak, but saying it back to me is a challenge for them. But anyway, so those are the ways you can teach them your language, right? You can expose them to your food. It breaks my heart when I see people, especially from my culture, right, will cook dishes from my culture, but then turn around and give their kids pizza or hot dog or a burger or something else. Exposing them to culture food is one of the biggest ways of exposing someone to a culture and connecting them with a culture. I actually run a nonprofit called Culture Encounters. I'm going to put a plug in for Culture Encounters now. But Culture Encounters, one of the things we do in our programs is that we take children and also adults to ethnic restaurants and we do food tours. And the idea is for them to connect with these cultures that are different from their own. And as a parent, you can do that at home. So teach them the language if you're able to. If it's too late, do not be hard on yourself. Forgive yourself and move on. But expose them to the food. Let them eat the food. I recall going to Ghana one time and my mom saying, "Oh, did you bring food for the children?" I was like, "No, they will eat what I provide." So what we eat at home is what everybody eats. I'm not making a Ghanaian dish and turning it around and giving them a burger or a pizza, whatever. There are days when we all enjoy that, but what I cook is what we eat. So that's the best way to expose your child to your culture. Another way is letting them talk to your family and friends, right? So when you're on the phone with grandma, let grandma talk to them. I know most of you probably already do that, but connecting them with these family members and explaining to them how they are related to these people helps shape their identity. One of the things that we do in my extended family, I actually started it a few years ago, and then this year I wasn't sure, and kudos to one of my cousins who was like, "No, we need to get back on Zoom." But on Christmas Day since COVID actually, we log on onto Zoom for a couple of hours, and all my like our relatives in distant places, my cousins, my aunties, we all get on Zoom and we talk, and it's chaotic and everyone is in the little boxes talking to their families. But the cool thing is that then we can look on the screen and start pointing to the little boxes and say, "Oh, this is uncle this is uncle that, this is auntie this is auntie that. They are my first cousin on this side or my second cousin," or whatever. But we do connect our children, and I think it's such a beautiful thing. With the use of technology, my friends, you can do that too. So connect your children to the aunties who live far away, to the uncles who live far away, right? And if possible, if the whole family going on a trip is hard for you or more expensive, can you send them on a trip by themselves, if they're old enough to travel, like unaccompanied minor, to an auntie or uncle for a few days or a few months, for a few weeks, something that connects them to your roots. It gives them a sense of identity. And my friends, it is so important, especially parenting in a foreign culture, that our children have a sense of connection to who we are. Being in the country you're raising them with is a given. They will connect to that. But having that strong roots brings this sweet merger between where you live now and where you're from, and giving them a good sense of that. Another way you can do Another way you can connect your children to your culture is through music, right? And through movies, appropriate age appropriate movies, of course, but through movies, through documentaries, the positives. And be mindful of what you're saying about your own people in front of your children. If you're constantly putting your people down and say, oh, Ghanaians are this, oh, Nigerians, we are like this, we are like that, the children are hearing the negative. Nobody wants to associate with a negative culture. No, we all want to associate with something positive. So remember, here is my tip today for you. You are a cultural ambassador for your children. So you need to be intentional about what you're presenting and how you're presenting. Now, if they eavesdrop on a conversation and you are frustrated with the government or something, I get that, right? We all are. But also make sure that when you present your culture, it's in a positive light. If there is a child with a Ghanaian name who does well in, let's say, the Olympics or something, let your children watch it and say, hey, this child is from our culture, or this name is from our culture, right? So promote your culture. Let your children see the positive and the beauty in your culture. If you do that, your children will attach well, will bond well with that culture, and also integrate what they are learning in the culture in which you're raising them. And they will be humans who are beautiful, who are well-rounded and culturally sound. So my hope is that as you raise your children in this culture, that you do not lose yourself, you do not play down your own culture, expose them to it, have a good medium between, a happy medium between your culture and the culture in which you're raising your children. And I bet you your children will have a strong cultural identity, and we will not have to deal with all the identity crisis, cultural identity crisis that we're dealing with in society these days with our teenagers and young adults. So I hope something I said today stood out to you. I hope that you have liked this video, you've subscribed to my page, and that you're sharing with other parents who are raising children in a foreign culture. I hope that this has been impactful. It has been a good use of your time. So remember, I am your family life coach. I am Amagati. If you have any questions, just put them in the comment box. We will discuss. If you need my services, I also do offer family life coaching. And I do have some classes coming up down the road. We will talk about those classes as well. So let me know that you like my channel by liking and subscribing and spreading the word. Thank you so much. Until next time, bye-bye.